What's going on, everybody? I don't want to take up too much time of your day, but let's talk about drag radials, specifically the Nitto NT555R2s, or as many people call them, the N555R2s. I'll be honest, I've ran these tires for quite some time, and I've done many launches on them on the street, and they just don't really hold up that well. Sure, I guess with an automatic car, they work fine, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my experience. So, if you guys don't know, I drive an '01 cammed Mustang GT with 373 gears and, bolt-ons, all that good stuff. And it being a stick shift car, it struggles to hook with whatever tire I put on it. But to be fair, I've only ran, all season tires and these tires, the drag radials. And they're not 28-inch tires or anything like that. They're just stock diameter. These specifically, the size on them is a 275/45 on the 17-inch rim.
But, you don't say rim, you say wheel.
Okay, whatever, man. You win, alright? Back to the video. And they're okay. I've been told that with drag radials, to not expect much, because when you're on the street, they kind of work, they kind of don't, and if you go to the track, they're so-so. So I do a lot of street driving, and I've only been to the track one time. When I went to the track, I was just spinning like crazy, no matter what my tire pressure was, no matter if I did a burnout or not. And there was a few passes where I actually dead hooked. But still, the tires, you really have to know how to feather the gas and the clutch, and it's just not really convenient for someone who just wants to get up and go. Especially when you're on the street. It's impossible to dump the clutch and actually get traction with these tires. I've tried it many times, and the only way you're going to get a pretty good traction is if you, I don't know, maybe do like a 1500 RPM clutch. Not even.
Clutch dump.
I was going to say a clutch dump, but even these tires struggle with that. Lately, I've been trying to slip the clutch and just practice my feathering with the gas and the clutch. And it's okay, but at the end of the day, when you want to get up and go, you just want to dump it, right? Now, let's be reasonable here. If you have an automatic transmission, it doesn't really matter what car you have. If it's like a 3,000 pound car, 4,000 pound, or if you have 20-inch rims or wheels, these will probably get the job done. And in my case, I have a stick shift car. For those of you that don't know, the crankshaft on the stick shift car is directly tied to the rear wheels. That's why it's much more torqueier, it's much more responsive. It's not like an automatic car where you put the pedal to the metal and it sends a signal to the ECU and to the transmission control modules, and it's just like a really smooth delivery. No, with these, it just doesn't work for a manual. And anyone who knows about drag racing or street racing, or tires for that matter, is going to tell you the same thing. For a stick shift car, buys plys. I'm not ready for that. I'm not going to run a full, essentially a slick all around. I just don't want to do that. It's just not convenient, because with my Mustang, it's a daily driver.
How is it driving the Mustang in the winter? It's not too bad. It could definitely be more safer.
And it's just, it doesn't really make sense. I bought these tires specifically to be good for daily driving, for the best tire wear, and for the worst case scenarios. So rain, you can drive these tires in the rain, no issues. Like, I mean, as long as you're not stupid, even if you probably have like 600 horsepower, you'll be just fine. Because there's a lot of, I'll show you right now, there's a lot of grooves in these tires. It's not like a full slick or anything like that. Look at that. You got all of these grooves, and it's just a well-designed drag radial. But not for me. Not for me. They're just not that good. Now, of course, every car is going to be different. Some cars are going to have a higher gear. Some cars are going to have a much taller wheel. So obviously, if you have like a 600 horsepower Challenger and you have 20-inch wheels in the back, you're probably going to be just fine. Especially if it's an automatic, you'll be fine. But for us manual boys, it's a different story. Keep in mind, if you hook with drag radials, you're going to be breaking things much more often. I've met people in person who have ran drag radials, and they take it to the track. They think that's a good idea. And they dead hook, they break sets of gears, they break rear axles. But what do you know? They'll pull up, a year later with plys, do like 100 million passes, and they'll be just fine. And the reason behind that is because drag radials, they're a little more harder. They're soft, but then they're hard. But at the same time, that in return just provides a very harsh shock onto your drivetrain. Your drivetrain is your transmission, your rear axle, everything tied to your car. Whereas with like a bias ply or a slick, it's much more forgiving because it's just a super soft tire. It's really, really soft. It's like driving a pillow down the road. It's so cushiony that your car is just much more forgiving with those shocks. I daily drive my car. You see? I told you it's a daily driver. It snowed a little bit in Wisconsin, but that's okay because we got the street tires mounted on here, the all seasons. All jokes aside though, yeah, you can't drive drag radials in the winter time in the snow. That's dumb. I gotta be honest, these Goodyear Eagle Exhilarate tires are pretty dang good for just all seasons. They're really good. I've driven in like 2-3 inches of snow on these babies, and they're not bad. Drive them in really heavy rain, they're gonna hold up just fine. I highly recommend these for any Mustang or Camaro owners. And it's not like it's making a lot of power. It's barely making 300 to the wheels. But with the manual transmission, 373 gears, that's what makes it a little challenge. But I'll be really honest. By running drag radials on the street and one time at the track, I really did learn how to race. Because when you think about racing in a manual car, all you think about is just dumping the clutch and just going. Sure, that works. But there's a specific technique to it. Sometimes you might have to slip the clutch. Sometimes you don't have to dump the clutch as fast. Sometimes, you got to think about stuff like what RPM you're going to be launching at, or what's your tire pressure. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the Nitto NT555R2 drag radials. If you have an automatic, they're okay. Well, I'm sure they're great. But with manuals, you can just forget about them. I didn't really notice much of a difference between my all-season Goodyear Eagle Exhilarates versus these. Like, really the only difference I noticed as soon as I mounted these tires up, which was that you can feel the softer compound. It's a much smoother ride when you start rolling forward from a stop. It's a little different. It feels great. It's like super easy to drive is what I'm trying to say. But other than that, the other main difference I noticed was that with roll races, that's a big difference. With these, they work. And that's the thing with drag radials. From a dead stop on an unprepped surface, you're gonna spin. And there's no way you're ever gonna dead hook on the street. I really don't think that's even possible. Unless you have a 28-inch tall tire with so much weight in the rear, maybe. But with a small tire size that's close to what came on your car from the factory, I don't think you're going to dead hook. I don't think you're going to get much traction at all, which can be a good thing, right? You don't want to break stuff either. Well, depending on how you look at it, right? Okay, so I just want to point this out. This is something that many people don't seem to understand, but I want to explain it, all right? So just hear me out. You have, like for example, in my case, I have a 25.7 inch tire. It's essentially 26 inch. So you got a little car right here. Pretend that's a car. Alright. Now you got the rims, or the wheels, I'm sorry. And I have 3.73 gears. Okay? Listen closely. Let's say we try to put a 28 inch tire, and usually 28 inch tires aren't just 28 inches. It's going to be like 28.3 or 0.2 or something like that. And then we have the same exact car, the same exact one, but now you have this huge tire. And you think you have a 373 gear. You think that's your actual gearing ratio. Sure, that's what you put in your rear axle, but if we do very, very basic math using a little nice calculator, I like this website, Interco Tire Corporation. So we got the new tire diameter. What was it again? 28.3. Okay, 28.3. Old tire diameter, 25.7. Current gear ratio, 3.73. That's what's in our rear axle. And look what's gonna happen. Boom, that's your actual gearing ratio after you put those tires on. That's why you more than likely will have much better traction after you put the biggest tires on your car. A lot of people don't seem to understand that, but that's just how it is. That's why if you want to go really fast, like me, fast, you try to put the smallest tire diameter on your car without compromising your gear ratio. I mean, this is all going to depend on the application. If you have a turbo car making 1,000 horsepower, yeah, you want this number to be as low as you can have it sometimes. If you have like a naturally aspirated car like me with bolt-ons and cams, you want to stay as close to this number as possible, or else your gears are going to be super long and you're actually going to go slower. With tire, like for example, if I were to put these tires on my car right now, of course the gearing ratio would be much lower, and that's gonna cause me to go much slower. Sure, I'm gonna get a lot of traction with these huge freaking tires compared to these bad boys, but it's just a huge compromise. And you also have to keep in mind the tire weight. The tire weight for each side, that adds up. That's called rotational mass. For example, I think on the Nittos, each tire is like 24 pounds or something like that. Give or take, right? Now, if you're going with 28-inch tires, sure, they're going to be softer. They're going to be a little bit lighter compared to a harder tire, but you're still going to be adding like at least 28 pounds to the rear end for each wheel. And okay, what if I get a 15-inch rim lightweight? Sure, okay, that works too. You can kind of equalize it by doing it with a 15-inch wheel, but you kind of get where I'm going here. It's much more complicated than you think. It's not just as simple as slapping on huge tires and being done with it. You're actually going to go much slower because the car is just going to either bog down or it's just going to feel like a dog because there's just not enough gear. So keep this in mind. Of course, if you have something insane like a 430 gear, I think you're going to be just fine with whatever huge set of tires you put on it. But for most of us, we're not just taking our cars only to the track. A lot of us take our cars on the street. A lot of us, we have like a street slash track car, and people like me daily our cars. So having a gear ratio like this just doesn't make any sense. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot more that goes into it than just slapping on huge tires. I know that sounds repetitive, but I really want to get that point out. With my street tires, for example, when you try to do a dig, you're gonna spin as much as these tires. But from a roll, let's say you top out at, with the 2-valve 4.6 Mustang GT. Let's say you top out at 6,500 RPMs, and you try to do a 3,500 RPM roll from second gear. They're gonna work. These tires are gonna work just fine for that. But with the street tires, that's when I would notice, like, you just lose traction. And it gets, not always, but sometimes. And I'll say this. I've had these drag radials lose traction, like, during rolls more than I've ever had with street tires. I know that probably sounds weird, but for some reason, I'm not sure if it's just the super hot temperatures here in Wisconsin during the summertime, or if it's the fact that maybe when you drive on these for too long, they just get super hot. But the traction just isn't there. Like, you could be second gear, 4,000 RPMs, hammer the gas, and it's just scary, man. I've had that happen to me plenty of times. It's like, what in the world is going on here? So yeah, man, learn from my mistakes. I thought running drag radials on the manual car on the street would be ideal. And it is, but it's really not worth the money you're going to pay compared to a street tire. Just because the tire is advertised for drag racing doesn't mean it's going to actually be any good. Like, even when I was at the track, I tried doing my best to get launches with those tires to be great. But like 90% of the time, it just wasn't in my favor. Literally, what would happen on a prepped surface, on a track that was freshly reconditioned and resurfaced, Great Lakes Dragway for those here in Wisconsin or nearby the Midwest. Literally, the only thing my car would do would top out at the tachometer. Once those tires spun, there was no way you could recover from it. On the street, it's a different story. In my experience, it's like the same thing as spinning out with the street tire. Once you spin, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it, but you're gonna keep moving forward. It's like the same thing as a street tire. But when you're at the track, that's when you really feel it. Or obviously if you do like any crazy street racing on a prep surface with a guy having a dedicated flamethrower thing and whatever special stuff they put on the ground. Like I said, it really all depends. But I'm talking about my situation. These are essentially 26-inch tires, and there's really not much difference compared to a street tire. I'm really disappointed in these. I wasted a good chunk of money, but at least I understand now, and I got the experience on actually knowing how to do my clutch and gas control. I run these at about 24 to 25 psi on the street, and they do just fine. As for any sort of punctures or nails, I have gotten 2 nails in these tires already, but not on the sidewall, so it's nothing crazy. It's definitely savable. The fastest I've been with these tires was 130 miles an hour, both on the street and on the freeway. And they're not bad. Like, you really can trust them. You drive on them, you feel pretty confident. But, at the end of the day, you're always going to want more traction for safety. That's all I got to say. Sorry if I rambled on too much. I try not to make these videos too long, but sometimes it just happens. With that being said, do I recommend these tires? Yes and no. It really all depends what your application is. For me, like since I daily drive my car. These are my summertime tires, and they did just fine, but from a dig racing perspective, they suck. Have a nice day. And if I'm being honest, dude, I'm really not a fan on how the tires look from the sidewalls. It's like too much going on, but there's just nothing appealing. You know, like you look at a Hoosier or a Mickey Thompson tire, or even a Toyo, and it just looks much cooler. But yeah, man, if you're gonna be running drag radials, keep that shit on the street. Don't take it to the track. If you take it to the track, what's gonna happen is you're more than likely gonna have some wheel hop. And as soon as that happens, ooh, goodbye to your axles, your gears, your transmission, your drivetrain. There's a reason why you see many racers running full slicks or bias ply tires. Have a good night.